tomorrow, the nation remembers again the gruesome Maguindanao massacre, which claimed 58 innocent lives, to include members of the media. The perpetrators of this crime are still undergoing trial. But when will justice finally come? Yes, the Ampatuan family are locked behind bars, but the question is often asked is how fast will justice be delivered for the families of the victims? And joining us tonight is the chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights, Chairperson Etta Rosales. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Robert.
Ma'am, tomorrow the nation remembers again the Maguindanao massacre for the third straight year. What lessons should we learn from the incident? Power has led to a wanton violation of human rights, and unless justice is delivered for the victims' families, those in power will continue to make use of their influence to kill people.
Well, definitely I think the government, especially through the courts, should do something in terms of hastening the litigation process. People have become impatient, and that is the reason why they clamor for a live coverage by media of the litigation. On the other hand, so I would like to appeal myself in behalf of the Commission on Human Rights and for the benefit of the people, that litigation should be made faster and more speedily. At the same time, you know, even the courts in Maguindanao are threatened. The judges are threatened. So I think that the security for the people and the courts and the lawyers involved in this should in fact be strengthened. Sometimes you do have a number of good judges, but they fear for their lives because they get threatened right and left. So I hope that security should be provided for the judicial system, at least in the armed region. Then again, even as far as of the accused are concerned, and I've brought this out already with Department of Justice Secretary of Laila de Lima, you know, yung 196 ang accused, no? There are 196 accused, and as of August of this year, I think that 96 have already been arrested, so 96 are still at large. But even among the 96, there are those, I am certain, who are innocent because, you know, a number of them have been arrested, especially the police. I have spoken to the wives of the police who have been arrested, and, you know, some of these policemen were abroad when they were arrested, and for all intents and purposes, their names were identified with those who were actually accused. So I think that maybe there should be efforts to try to focus more on the principals rather than on the rank and file, a number of whom are probably innocent. Ang nangyayari kasi dito, nagkakaroon ng stigma both for the victims and the accused if justice is not meted out in a faster way.
Ma'am, today, do you think enough is being done either to protect the witnesses and in the whole process of this trying of the trial that's being ongoing?
Well, isn't it evident that maybe more effort should be done to protect the witnesses? Because about 3 or 4 have already been killed, and you know, that's dangerous, and that's worrisome, because more than anything else, you need these witnesses. So I think that the security situation is something that's worrisome in Maguindanao. It's not just the witnesses, as I said a little while ago. It's also the judges. It's also the lawyers. Now, the government, the military, the police should double their efforts to provide an environment where the people will feel safer. And I hope that the judicial system does something about it. 196 have already been arrested. 96 are supposed to be still at large. Then you've got about 54 candidates that are running for election with the name of Ampatuan. Now, I'm not saying that just because you have the name of Ampatuan, you're guilty. Hindi naman dapat ganon. Pero sa tingin ko, I hope that the electorate in Maguindanao and in the ARM will really use their heads, will really come out with informed choices before they decide to vote for whoever are the local officials. Because you must remember that the Ampatuan massacre is a product of warlord rule among those local governments, governors and mayors who have actually been allowed to abuse their authority for years on end.
Ma'am, with regards to the call for a live coverage of the trial, which the Supreme Court actually ruled against, are you still in favor of this, and why is it so important?
The coverage is very important because, first of all, especially after 3 years, people are impatient. People would like to know what's happening, especially the victims, the families. You have a right to information. And you must remember, Robert, this is not a local affair. This is actually being monitored by the international diplomatic and human rights community. So it's very important to have coverage that is by media. But again, you have to look into the idea of, the threat, the security that is needed, especially for the witnesses and the people involved in this whole thing. And I suspect that maybe this is one of the reasons why the Supreme Court came out with this ruling that it hesitates to have full live coverage in order to try to secure people who are involved in this whole litigation process. Maybe we can come up with some kind of a compromise.
Compromise, yes.
No? Yeah. So maybe just one media outfit should be able to look into this, or should be allowed inside, and then maybe the coverage, but at least make this available to people outside. Because I was being told that it is true that the Klieg lights and media actually affect the capacity of the judges and then the lawyers.
Ma'am, are there still moves to actually go on with these discussions to have a compromise of maybe not full coverage but part coverage of this trial?
I'm sure that there are moves that are being made regarding this, and I hope there are. But we have to ensure that at least there has to be coverage. At least the people must have access to information ongoing there. And the courts should do their best, to make sure that the litigation is more speedily done, because it's people to get this.
Yes. Moving on, ma'am, since many of the suspects on the trial are from the PNP, which were used by the Ampatuans as members of their private armies, what are you doing to ensure that men in uniform are not assigned to powerful politicians? Are there any programs you have in place for the PNP and the AFP with regards to this?
Yes, we directly engage with the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police. In fact, during this Human Rights Consciousness Week, we shall be having brass tacks discussions at the top level with them, including the human rights officers of both the armed forces and the Philippine National Police. There's a lot of work that's going on right now for training them on rules of engagement, for understanding what the international humanitarian law is, human rights and the rule of law, and for insisting and asserting that those who are accused, in fact, must be able to go through prosecution and conviction if necessary within the sector.
Ma'am, is it still a major concern with regards to human rights violations by politicians, and how do you deal with these politicians, if there are any?
Human rights violations of politicians?
Yes.
Well, if there are human rights violations of politicians, definitely those who should complain against them can complain to the Commission on Human Rights, and we will be dealing with them. The Tampakan, if you're familiar with the Tampakan, the mining operations in the Val del Sur, definitely an investigation is ongoing right now, and the investigation should also look into the local government and the local government's efforts to have tried to protect the people within, and what the local government is now doing with respect to the brutal killing that took place with the Milaan family, the mother and the two children, 3 children.
Ma'am, overall, as compared to previous years, how is the human rights situation right now? Are there less violations now committed by the AFP, the PNP, or is your advocacy with them producing or positive results?
if you compare this to the past administration, there's been a radical reduction as far as extrajudicial killings, as far as torture, and as far as enforced disappearances are concerned. Yes, there has been some improvement, but the killings that are still taking place. In Davao del Norte, there was this series of killings that we're now looking into and are investigating, and then of course there's this Davao del Sur in Tampacan that took place. It's much more reduced, but having said that, it's still worrisome because the rank and file will have a lot to learn with respect to the rules of engagement and the attitude of these people to make shortcuts and not to, in fact, learn all about the law. A lot of human rights violations take place because they don't know the law. They ignore the law.
So are there programs, ma'am, to create this awareness for the people and for the agencies involved?
Oh, yes. We have, in fact, we have ongoing cross-verification, cross-validation efforts now between the military and the CHR and also with the Philippine National Police. At local levels, we've started it, especially with the local police. And it's a slow process, but at least we've started already. And we're trying to look into a deeper analysis of cases that have actually taken place so that these policemen and this military will be able to know, straight from the cases that we have just resolved, how they should in fact improve themselves. I think that maybe there should be internal efforts to cleanse themselves and to retrain themselves, especially in Manila.
Yes.
I've talked about this very openly. I think that the Manila Police should necessitate to have a retraining, comprehensive retraining, because they masyadong magagaling ang mga hinuhuli nila dahil sa nakaposes na nga, naaagawan pa sila ng baril. And so the accused end up being killed by
I guess
the
there's still much work to do with this regard. I hope we still have more time. But on that note, ma'am, thank you very much for joining us tonight. That was Human Rights Chairperson Etta Rosales. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.